Hello there, you beautiful soul, and welcome back to another Culture Talk segment with your host, Rebecca Munoz of Cultured Society. I am here with another special guest today, and this one, I'm so honored. I'm honored with every single guest that comes through because every single person that I'm having the opportunity to interview is super special and is just creating waves on this planet, are making impacts in ways that sometimes they don't even recognize that they're making impacts. So I'm here to introduce people that are a representation and a living vessel for God's work and just doing things for our communities and globally to be able to impact people in ways and to show people that we are here. We are specially designed to be able to fulfill a divine purpose and just here to serve. So Jolene Martinez is a licensed clinical social worker, currently serving as the Chief Operating Officer for Families and Youth Incorporated, a nonprofit organization operating in southern New Mexico. She earned both her graduate and undergraduate degrees from New Mexico State University. And Jolene's career has been focused primarily in child welfare, serving most of her career at the State Protective Service Office. More recently, her efforts have been centered on renewing, developing, and restoring services at Families and Youth Incorporated in the areas of behavioral health, innovative youth programming, child welfare, emergency shelter, and food insecurity. Jolene's social work interests include assessing and intervening with macro systems at their intersection with oppressive practices that harm and immobilize families and communities. Born and raised in northern New Mexico, Jolene moved to southern New Mexico to pursue her education and has made Las Cruces, New Mexico, her home for the last 18 years. Jolene is married to Dustin, a U.S. Army veteran, and together they have 3 children. On a personal note, Jolene describes herself as a believer, leader, and motivator, a baby artist, retro sneakerhead, and a general rebel rouser on a mission to heal herself through using her time, talents, and treasures to serve others. And with this, I welcome the beautiful Jolene Martinez. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jolene.
Thank you, friend. I appreciate you taking the time to just have an honest and connected conversation. So thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And I have a really quick story as to how I actually met Jolene. So over the last year, I have been on a guerrilla marketing mission. And I just recently, a little over a year, moved back to my home state, my hometown, Las Cruces, New Mexico, where we both reside. And right before I moved here, the pandemic happened. So I had to think of creative ways to be able to connect with people safely, but to really not lose the art of connection and communication. And it's really important during this time, especially that we take the time to not only connect with ourselves, most importantly, but also to take the time to authentically connect with other people. And even people that you would have never imagined connecting with. The day that I didn't happen to meet Jolene that specific day that I went out into the community, but I just so happened to end up in her home community and knocked on her door. And I had a conversation with her husband. It was a pretty thorough conversation, and I left my flyer and information with him. And he said that he was going to hand it to his wife. At this time, I had no idea who she was and had no expectations for her to even reach out to me. Well, a few days, she sneaks in through my DM on Instagram and sends me a message. And we ended up connecting a few days later over the phone. We had an hour conversation, and it was as though I had known her my entire life. We ended up setting up a date to meet up for coffee, which we didn't even have coffee, but at one of my favorite places, Spirit Winds. If you ever end up in Las Cruces, New Mexico, make sure to visit Spirit Winds. It's an amazing coffee and gift shop. We connected, we vibed, and it was like she was a long lost soul sister. And it was just history from then on. We just have had the opportunity to really connect. And I've learned so much about this woman and all the amazing projects that she's doing here in the city. And I'm so honored for all these guests to come through because, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of vulnerability, authenticity, and really self-connection to be able to do these, facilitate these conversations. And if you are becoming a part of this community and listening into these conversations, really understand how important it is to authentically connect, but also to give respect to the speaker and to the person who is taking the time to be vulnerable and share their stories, because there's not enough people doing this, for one. And two, we really need to be able to respect, to honor, and to give space for people to share their stories. It doesn't matter if it's not aligned with yours. It doesn't matter if their philosophies don't resonate with you, their belief systems. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we all come from the dust of the earth. We are all designed pretty similarly. We just all have a very specific DNA code that we have been brought here to this earth to fulfill. And so it's our duty to be able to, doesn't matter if you don't know this person or if you've met this person, a family member, whatever it is, to respect differences, because again, we are all so uniquely designed. And we all deserve the space to be able to share our stories. So with this, I introduce our conversations of culture and life philosophies. And I'm so excited to hear this woman's story today because I know she has a good one. So with this, I introduce the first question. Jolene, what is your life's philosophy?
I think that's probably like one of the best questions I've been asked in a long time. So I really thought about it. I've been really thinking about what is my life's philosophy, and on a deep level, I feel like the answer to that is living into my Creator's design and purpose for my life, and being on a constant mission to really understand what the Creator's call on my life is, and to live into that. I think that that's taken time for me to understand as a woman and as a leader and as an adult. And I think inside of that, to get underneath the purpose, I think the mission is really to analyze all the time. Am I spending my time and my talents and my treasure doing what my Creator has called me to do? And I think that evolves over time. And I think that that has been like the underpinning of how I analyze, my purpose and my philosophy, is to think about those three kind of cornerstones. Am I using my time the way I'm supposed to? Am I using the God-given talents and opportunities that my Creator has given me, and my treasures, like the resources He's given me, the privilege, the opportunities, my experiences? Am I using them in a way that blesses the world? And I think that that's my primary philosophy. And then I feel like I have such a distinct identity in my role as a social worker. And we have kind of a rooted philosophy in general as social workers, and that's just to meet people where they're at. And that means literally and figuratively, just meeting people where they are in their communities, their homes, their circumstances, their experiences, and to just really live my life and my philosophy with the idea that I should leave all those things that I interact with, better than I found them. And so, I think my work and my faith kind of intersect to developing what my life's philosophy is. But on some level, I also don't think that my life's philosophy belongs to me. I think that that really there's like a creed that's been placed on all of us, a purpose. And I think sometimes we think we're in more control of that philosophy than we are. And I think every day we're just given opportunities, right, to like interact with the world, the people who are in it, the circumstances, to just to see if we're living out our best design. And I think it's naive of us to think that we hold all the answers to that philosophy. I think sometimes it's a limiting belief to think that we're in full control of that philosophy and that other things don't intercede with it. So think that's a really long-winded answer to that. But it holds a lot of truth for me, for sure.
I'm so glad you said that, because that really goes into my next question. And you mentioned it already in your response of how that's evolved, but I know that you haven't always felt that way. And I'm sure now, with having a family and children, it's really evolved. So how has that philosophy evolved over the years for you?
Oh man, I think I can think of a few different ways that it's evolved, but I think it's always evolved most sharply when I'm humbled or broken in some kind of circumstance. I think more recently I've been humbled in that philosophy through illness. When I think my philosophy changes when the only things I'm left to rely on is my hope or my faith in something greater or bigger than myself. I think that's often where I can look back in my life and or chapters and say, like, man, that was a really distinguishing moment in how I perceive the world and the people that I love inside of that world. And I think often, I think even through my own personal development, I think it's evolved when I've had safety in my life, because I haven't always had safety. And that safety has allowed for me to allow vulnerability and authenticity and love into my life in a different way. And when you allow those things in, I think it reshapes your mind and your heart to experience things around you differently. And I think that has been, I've experienced that both in my personal life and in my career. And I'm just really grateful for that in my profession, that I can extend my authentic self, my love, my vulnerability into my profession, into the community, because I get so much back. And I think my work has always evolved. And so my philosophy has always had a chance to evolve. And I think more than anything, and I think why I feel oftentimes so connected to you, I think anytime you can be seen and heard, and connected to someone else or something greater than yourself, like a creator, then I think you leave the doors open to always allow your philosophy to evolve, and just your purpose. And I think that being seen, heard, and connected or valued, I think those are all things that allow for opportunity for us to evolve as human beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at the end of the day, really, all everybody's looking for is to be seen, heard, connected, and loved, right? And we can't do that unless we open ourselves up to the evolution of humanity. It's just a never ending evolution. And we're always going to have that core philosophy, but I feel like there's like always room to have, even evolved in our current philosophy and adopt other ideas of what that philosophy could be, especially when you're in a role like yourself. You're always interacting with, people that don't necessarily have as much, that there is so much need in this world, and it really gives us an opportunity, and even expands our perspective, right?
Right. And I think sometimes people, when they're in a state of lacking, have the most clarity because, and I think, in our career, we're trained so much to think about people, individuals, families being the experts of their own life. And I think that's true. I think we're conditioned as social workers to believe that we're never the experts on life, or experiences. And so I think that's been fruitful both in my personal life and my professional life, because sorry, I have someone coming in my house. It's my mom. So there's part of the rooting in my philosophy. That's my mom. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
But I think we're conditioned in social work to really believe that, right? That you're not an expert on anyone's circumstance or their situation. And that always keeps you humble and in the state of wanting to learn from other people. And I think that's probably the best quality of our profession, and how it's bled into my personal life is never feeling like I've achieved expertise at anything. I'm like, I always have this idea that I'm open and available and continuously learning, because I think that's what the families that we work with show us. You know, you never see the same thing, the same circumstance, the same feeling, experience. It's never duplicated, right? It's always unique to people's experience in the world.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. And this is, one of the main reasons why I decided to start these conversations, facilitate these conversations is for that reason, is that it gives us a very it expands our perspective, especially when we give ourselves the time to listen to what people's experiences are and have been. And it really gives us a greater understanding of humanity and more compassion, right? It shows us more compassion, empathy, and most importantly, grace, right? Because we're all going through this human experience. And although I like to say that we are the architects and designers of our own destiny, we don't really know what other people's are, and it's really important for us to give people that space to be able to share and expand, because we're always expanding, we're always evolving. And you had mentioned earlier that you were humbled through an experience that you had through illness. Isn't it amazing how, well, it's unfortunate sometimes, but it's amazing how sometimes we have to have the rug pulled from underneath our feet to actually see what's always been in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just because you can believe in something greater than yourself, or a connection to something greater than yourself, doesn't mean that the world and your creator won't humble you, and remind you what's important. And sometimes that perspective taking requires that you have this big monumental thing that really creates a shift in your life, for you to see, right? Or even slow down to the opportunity to really to allow those circumstances to reveal themselves to you. Why did they happen? What was the purpose behind them? And I think what's really been a challenge, right, is having physical illness, and staying connected to the idea that there should be a lesson behind why, you know what I mean, or what should I learn from this experience, and how should I take that learning and apply it to my life. Because I believe, our hope systems, our faith systems, lead us to believe that we don't experience pain or shame or any of these kind of emotions, in an empty kind of way, right? They all have purpose and design for good, and I believe that. I have never felt like anything bad bad, right? If we label it bad, that has happened to me, that I've walked away from that circumstance feeling like it wasn't for a reason. It wasn't meant to shape me or my purpose or what I was meant to do. And so I feel that same way with physical illness. I think it's taken a long time for me to accept, right, that my body is limiting. It's limited, um, as far as my mind allows it to be, and that there has to be this connection between mind, body, and spirit, for me to have real, genuine healing and purpose in what Christ, my creator, wants me to do.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you said that it's, we try to separate the physical, right? And we have to understand that we are holistic. We are holistic beings by nature, and that it is a mind body spiritual connection. You can't disconnect from one the other. When we're going through physical transformation, like if we go work out or if we change our eating or whatever, it's you can't separate any of it all has to be in alignment with each other. And it's such a beautiful thing that, I mean, to be able to recognize it in this lifetime, right? Because many people go through this life asleep, not really aware to that capacity that our creator has given us to fully heal and restore our bodies, mind, and spirit. So that's so beautiful that you've had that awakening, and that's come to the forefront of your mind. And how would you say that your upbringing and circle of influence has impacted the way that you think and live today?
I think my upbringing has everything to do with how I live my life today. I was raised by really a community of strong women, women who were strong not because they wanted to be, but because life had created lots of barriers and challenges to life. And, I was raised with a single mom, my mom, Helen. She always had to work, one job, two jobs, work at a distance, depend on, my maternal grandmother in raising us. My maternal grandmother today is 93 years old and thankfully still with us. It's such a big influence on my character and my life. And my maternal aunt. And really between those three women, I was raised in community, right? They all did what they had to do, the sacrifices they had to make to raise my cousin and I, really without help, And I think being raised by women and watching, on some level, watching women suffer, struggle, struggle to meet all the demands of this human world, right? Like financially, circumstantially, relationally, watching, them be impacted by domestic violence, by poverty. I think those things really changed me as a young girl. And I think one of the things that was probably most influential was watching my mom be a victim of domestic violence. And I think that she would never tell a story or a narrative where she was the victim, but very much watching those circumstances shaped my childhood and shaped early on my experiences with fear, hope, healing, struggle, because I was watching really the person that I cared about the most in these really difficult circumstances. And I think those things prepared me to do the work that I'm doing today, or allowed me to have a heart and empathy for families and communities, because I've watched my family. I've been in that same circumstance. I've been impacted by trauma, poverty, those things that really shape you. And I've never watched any of those women in my life use it as a reason or a purpose to stop believing in a purpose for themselves. It's never stopped them from believing in a creator. It's never stopped them from believing in healing. If anything, it's forced them to cling to those things, and those messages of hope always resonated, even in my childhood, right? That those experiences were not limiting, that they were gonna shape some kind of purpose or meaning in my life, and that has stood to be true. I don't think anything I experienced as a child has done anything but bless me in my adulthood. At the same time, I think that trauma and those early adverse childhood experiences are somewhat at the root of my health issues. And, one of the things that we work really hard to do at FYI, where I work, and just here in the community, is to get people to understand adverse childhood experiences and how they're connected to adult health outcomes. And even being in the field, it's taken me such a long time to recognize that my own experiences have likely led to my own poor health outcomes. And I think that that's a problem that we have in the Latino community, just in our region here in New Mexico. Childhood well-being is such a big problem. And if we're honest with ourselves about why, it's because families lack resources, they lack equity, they lack opportunity, they lack opportunity. Really our food pathways, I think, are at the bottom of a lot of our well-being issues. Our lack of access to food, healthy choices for food, economic opportunity to advance the way that what we put into our bodies, and also the education. And I think being educated about health equity is a privilege. It's certainly a privilege here in New Mexico. It's not a right, where I think other families, health equity or health knowledge has been part of their family value system. And I think in New Mexico, we're so behind, and we don't realize how food equity, access to healthy food, how that's all part of healing, healing our bodies, healing our trauma, healing our families. You look generationally at what most Latino families in New Mexico experience: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, all these things that are very much rooted in the color of our skin. And that has to change here in New Mexico for us to see real childhood well-being change.
I got the chills, and I'm so glad that you mentioned all of that, because these are conversations that you and I have had offline. And it's really important because we are taught to believe that these issues are rooted in genetics, and it's not. Disease and ailments of the body are really rooted in generational curses. It's cultural traumas that are passed on by generation to generation, and it takes individuals to break those, to take responsibility. And it's really true what you said about, even, the lands that we live in, the land of enchantment, because we are so behind in education and resources, where money is being facilitated not responsibly, where it should be put back, invested back into the people that have ultimately cultivated this land. And we're so prosperous in our land, right? We just lack the education and resources to be able to cultivate it in a way where we can live and thrive off of it. Because I'm a true testament that I didn't come from the education that was required, that other people have the opportunity. I sought it out, right? I sought it out, and I was able to heal my body naturally just by fueling my body with natural resources, not processed foods like we're fed, in our community. And so I'm so glad that you had an opportunity to uplevel yourself in a way where you could really, be at the forefront of these issues and be able to educate people, because it's so necessary, especially now, especially now.
I think those system issues, um, especially here in New Mexico, right? We look at a majority of our state is, Native American, Hispanic. This year with the census was the first time our African American population grew here in New Mexico, especially here in Doña Ana County. And then you look at our childhood well-being disease outcomes are very much higher in those people of color. We have to be honest about why, right? We look at intergenerational trauma, slavery, removal of Indian land, all those things are rooted in our history, in the way that they changed our food pathways, in the ways that we were able to create opportunity for our families, And I think for me, it took, I had all those opportunities. I had the opportunity to be educated. I had the opportunity to, a lot of privilege, right? In terms of how hard my family worked to pull us out of poverty. But what we never had the opportunity to do is to integrate those lifestyle changes into our family, because, I talk very openly about I didn't eat salad on a regular basis, or vegetables, because we couldn't afford to. You know what I mean? Unless my grandmother grew them in her garden, or we had an occasional salad. Like that's how we knew we were eating out somewhere fancy, is if we went somewhere and they had a salad before dinner. We had a lot of processed foods, starches, and then as an adult, as I got to trying to get underneath what was creating illness, a lot of it was about inflammatory foods and things that I was putting into my body, like dairy. I guess went my whole life, 34 years eating dairy and eggs when my body had an allergy to it, and my body had developed an acceptance of that allergy, and feeling like, oh, I feel like this, everyone must feel like this when they eat. And it's not the case, right? It's not the case. And then also thinking about, how did that impact my cultural food pathways? I had to remove cheese and corn and eggs and all these things that are central, right, to eating comida with your family, right? Like now you can't just go eat enchiladas at your mom's house. Like then it creates a problem, and then a conversation. It creates a problem, but it also creates a conversation, and being able to say to my grandmother, my mom, who also struggles with inflammatory disease, to think about what she's putting in her body. And then also for us to change now what I'm putting in my children's body. And I think that's really important, because, my husband and I have 2 adopted children, and their experiences are also rooted in trauma, in being removed from their birth families, the experiences that they've had in the child welfare system. And so teaching them also to that the food that they put in their bodies, how they regulate that is just as important as the therapy that they go to the mass that we take them to on Sunday. It's just important as the relational work that we expect at home, right? All those things are all rooted in our healing. And so even though it has taken a lot of pain personally for me to experience sickness and illness, I think it's also allowed for conversation and healing and creativity, within our household. Think about how we heal, and so that's ultimately been a blessing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you said it earlier about how you didn't use, or a lot of times people use their experiences or their upbringing to victimize, right? Or even stay stagnant in that experience because, well, that's just the way that it is. That's just the way that I was brought up. That's just my culture. But in all reality, these are all experiences that we can use as a way to change the trajectory of what our history was. Because at the end of the day, we have choices every single day. Some of us may not have as many choices as others do, but there's so much opportunity in education. I mean, I know even a lot of people that live in below, like in an economic stance where they don't maybe have a lot of money, but they have a phone. They have access to a phone. And when you have access to a phone and internet, you have access to all the information that you could get at a university. It's just
Right.
that desire that you have. You have to have that desire to want to change and learn.
Right.
To
And I
never end.
think sometimes, because I've seen that and people will ask that in the work that we do, like, does that homeless person really deserve housing? Does that mom who used drugs really deserve her baby back? And you think, right, because people have these things at their fingertips, that always means that their body or their brain is in a circumstance where they're ready to learn and adapt. And that's not always the case. You know what I mean? I think we always try and help people make sense of their worth and their experiences, because they may not see that phone as a gateway to education. They may see it as the way that their perpetrator gets in contact with them, or maybe their way that. So I think that, equity is at the heart of really trying to help people understand right where they are, what can change their trajectory, and just trying to make these little microcosms, right? Like, change what you eat today and maybe you'll think about it again 30 days from now or 60 days from now, or like you said, let's look up this article together, and then maybe they come across it again when they're in a different state or they're ready to think about change, right? When threats or other things in their environment have changed.
That's
But I
right.
think it's in the helping profession, I think for us it's so hard to see, well, I think systems fail people, right? Like, health systems fail people, the doctor fails people, the financial system fail people, especially people of color. And so when we talk about how do we close those gaps, I think it's just conversations like this, right? Between two women of color who can sit at a table across from each other and share our experiences. And that same thing is true in people's communities or homes. It's just about being humble enough to see yourself in someone else, and see yourself in their hurt or in their opportunity.
Opportunity.
Because like you said at the beginning, I think what you said is really powerful, that we're all like very so closely linked in our creation and in our DNA, and we all ultimately want the same things. And I think that's what keeps us all motivated, right? Is connection. So.
Absolutely. You're so right. And it really just sometimes takes a powerful word, a conversation to be able to activate somebody's awareness, because these conversations, although I'd like to say that they're being had all the time, they're not. They're not. And we need to be able to open space for these conversations to activate people's awareness, because oftentimes people just don't even know, like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And until you know, you can make the change. But if you don't know, you're just going to continue to live, blindly, right? And education is so important, but it can happen in so many ways. You don't necessarily have to go to a traditional school to
Right.
be able to get these resources. I mean, thankfully, there's organizations like Families and Youth Incorporated, and maybe they're not doing all that they can, but they're doing what they can with the resources that they have available to them to be able to give that to our communities that really need it. And with that, that goes into my next question. Do you believe that the line of work that you do infects our society with positivity?
I think that depends on who you ask. I think it depends on who you ask and their experiences. I think when people think about social workers, they very much refer to the media or television in the way that we're portrayed, the frumpy social worker with who's there to take your kids, or who's there to investigate a difficult family circumstance. And I'm always reminded of Lilo and Stitch, when the social worker comes and he has his briefcase, and when he comes, he finds the family in the worst possible circumstances, And I think those are the ways that social workers are portrayed. And so when people experience us sometimes for the first time or over the course of their lifetime, it really just depends on their experience. And I think that also it depends on that social worker's personal, where they are at personally, if they've done their personal work, and if they're ready in a healthy way to intercede with the public, with families. But I think at the root of our profession, I think our goal is to just meet people where they're at, and to be very to take ourselves outside of that solution, and to just really to be vessels. One of the things that we really proclaim is to be change agents, but also to not be the determining factor about what that change is, but just really create enough disturbance, whether that be through social justice, whether that be through creating conflict, even if that means through making their home environment or their circumstances more pliable or adaptable. Advocating, sometimes people just need advocacy, sometimes people just need connection. So I think it just depends on your experience. I know there are some people I would meet over the course of my life who I worked with them 10 years ago, and they say, I still remember you, or, thank you for that time in my life. And I still see people today who, will give me the finger at Walmart. So I think it just depends on their experiences and whatever we were working on. But I think, the profession in social work, I think we've really also changed over time. I think when our profession started, we were really focused on like those issues that everyone could agree need to be addressed, like children without parents, or people living in the streets. And then as politics and government and all these other intersections have created complexity to our systems, I think it's become harder and harder to be an effective social worker, because there's so many things that intersect with your profession. You know what I mean? Whoever's in charge in government, whatever kind of resources you may or may not have to help families. Sometimes there's abundance and sometimes there's scarcity. And so I think at the end of the day, our hearts are pure. Our people at FYI, I really admire them in so many different levels. Just the work they do every day, from literally being outside, feeding people, handing out meals, to meeting people on the streets, sharing, information about keeping their physical health safe, whether that be through sexual health education, needle exchange, and doing a lot of those different things that you don't really see with your eyes. If you're looking into a community, it's hard to see unless you want to see it, and it goes unseen unless you're really intentional about looking. And so, my staff and my team, they really work in the background of a lot of these circumstances, never hoping to be seen, never hoping to be validated or thanked. They're some of the most selfless people I've ever met in my life. Just their commitment to service, to community, is really, in my mind, unmatched. And they do a lot of things that are full of humility. And certainly the work that they do humbles me all the time. So I hope we are impacting the community in a positive way. We've been here, this is our 42nd year here in the region. And I hope families who have experienced our organization over the generations, because now we've seen parents of parents, children of other families who have interacted with our system. I hope we've left a positive impact on the community and on people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, and you're right that it's people's personal perception of the experience that they're having that's going to, I mean, I'm also not everybody's cup of tea, and you know what I mean, and neither are you. And so it's always really great to be able to accept that and to recognize that we're not always going to have a positive impact on every single person that we come in contact with, but with our intentions being of the most high, to be able to recognize that the people that we are touching, that not necessarily that no, those other people don't matter, but that the percentage that we're touching, it's always with a good intention. And I truly believe that you're doing that. How do you stay relevant, unique, and true to who you are as a person?
I think that's another really good question. And I think when I think about staying relevant, I always think about my kids and their TikTok dances and their musics, and it's just stuff that I can't keep up with. And they say, man, it's relevant, mom, it's so cool. And I'm like, is it though? So I think really relevance is objective. It really just depends on whether someone thinks what you're doing or what you're after or what you possess or hold or know is relevant to them. I think what I, and a lot of times, people that know me best, I would prefer not to be relevant. I would prefer to be in the background and let others make up their own narrative about relevance. I think what I would prefer to be is aligned. And I think that aligned with myself, aligned with my mission, that God has laid on my life. I think to be aligned with my values. I think that that's really what motivates me to stay unique, is to be true to those ethics, to those values, especially considering, I think one of the things that's important to me is, I always hear people say, well, I don't care what other people think, and they don't let those things really settle in to their mantra or their objective. But I think one of the things that's been really important to me as I develop my character and is to have people who can mirror back to me myself authentically, like someone who's genuinely knows me, who can look at me and see me for who I am and what I am, and who can mirror things back to me and say, like, girl, you're out of line, or like, that was great, and I see you, and validate you. And I think having mirrors, people who mirror you, is really important. And I feel like, I have a mirror in my husband, I have a mirror in my mother, some close friends, and definitely my children. I think my children mirror me all the time. And I think that that's where I learn, it is important to me that what they see in the mirror is reflected out in the community and also reflected in my home. Like, if they see me as fun, I want to reflect fun in their life. If they also, right, if especially like at work, in the past I've had people say, like, well, you're kind of hard to read, or you're hard to get to know. And I've said, like, well, I'm an open book. And they're like, are you though? Like, are you really an open book? And as authentically as I'm speaking to you today, it may seem that way, but I think we all have those reservations, right? And then you're like, okay, if someone who really knows me can call that out and say, like, you might say that's true, but it's not. I think those mirrors are important to kind of keep you unique and humbled. And I think, those are all important parts of me as a person. And I think just this personal truth, I think that's also objective. I think our truths about ourselves are always evolving, and
Yeah.
our level of like consciousness and what we're able to perceive as truth is always evolving. Like, I think one of the things I've had a hard time with lately, right, is being sick and questioning, who am I if I can't do social work, or who am I if this isn't part of my identity? And being true to myself, having that honest conversation with myself has been really difficult, because I hold so much of my identity in my profession. But like, does that consciousness settle in unless you have a hard experience, right? Or unless someone something in the environment awakens you to it. And so I think being true to yourself is just being okay with meeting yourself where you're at every day too. And I think something I've learned from you, because I think you have these honest conversations that I've loved keeping up with and watching online myself. But I think one of the things that I would like to see on these series is like more of you. But I think one of the things that you've taught me is to live in flow and to just do what my body is asking me for, what my heart is asking for from me in that very moment. And I think that that's living out truth, because we may not always be ready to meet the demands of other people, the world, our profession, our circumstance. And to me, that's personal truth, a level of truth that I wasn't ready to reckon with until really I've been in conversation with you. And so I think that's something that you've awakened in me and that I'm grateful for.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And um, this type of flow has not always come that easy for me, although a lot of people may think that because of the way that I've freely lived my life. But I've come across a lot of obstacles and adversity in my life through the experiences that I've had, even when I was living in flow, but you really don't realize, I mean, you realize it when you're living it because you recognize that tomorrow is not promised. And whenever you're living in the state of flow and this is going to go into my next question, you already pretty much answered this, but I want you to go a little bit deeper because you literally feel it. Like your gut, it's not indigestion most of the time. It really is your gut intuition talking to you. And naturally, because we are in a like we are holistic beings, our mind, body, spiritual connection. We're energy, our body is flowing fluidly, and our gut intuition literally is our solar system. It sends signals to the rest of our brain. And when we're not, or rest of our body, and when we're not in alignment, oftentimes our body will break down on us. We have health issues, we have anxiety attacks, we're fully stressed out. I mean, there's so many things that are creating havoc within not only our temple, right? The temple that we live in, but then our environment tends to be in chaos. And so everything's like just divinely connected. And I've learned that process through constant change. And there's a lot of people that are not as open to change, but in reality, it's happening all the time. That's the only constant that we have is change. You being adaptable to change and recognizing and accepting that that's what it is, and that we're not really, we shouldn't be identified by what we do for a living. We should be identified as who we are as a person, right? And naturally, we are social workers. That's what we've come here to do,
Right.
to serve. You know what I mean? And that's when you feel the most in alignment with yourself and humanity, is when not only you're serving yourself, most importantly, because you can't serve from an empty cup, right? But when you're actually going out and doing something that is going to benefit the up leveling of humanity, and that's social work right there. So do you believe that the work that you do every day is aligned with your calling and higher purpose?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've been so blessed to have a profession that aligns with my calling, because I feel like that's been a unique experience for me. I don't always have a lot of friends or others who can empathize with that feeling, but I feel like I also got led to the profession. When I was a young kid going to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a lot of just opportunity, like when opportunity unfolds in front of you and you have no other choice but to walk through those doors because that's what's unfolding for you. I really felt like God led me through that, because my personal motivation was to go to the Air Force, to do something very different with my life. And really, my life shifted right before I left to college. Again, another circumstance of domestic violence, of poverty. It really required me to pursue a different path. And I feel so humbled in that, because otherwise I don't know if I ever would have become a social worker or really known that that's what I I wanted for my life. I knew as a young girl that I would do something with people or to help, but I didn't even really know what a social worker did or encompassed. And I think biblically, like, if you're a real believer, regardless of faith system, whether you're a Christian, Hindu, Muslim, at the root of what those things are called to do is to see humanity,
Mm,
and it's to feed, to clothe, to shelter, to offer yourself up as a vessel. And I think those things are symbiotic, right, across belief systems. But I think really one of the things that my faith as a Christian has given to me is to live biblically, to serve in my profession biblically, and all of those things that God calls us to do, right? To give drink to thirsty, to give food to the hungry, to shelter the homeless. We really do all of those things at FYI, and I couldn't find a better way in my mind to align, both my belief system and my work, in serving others. And I think that I've just been really lucky, really blessed to have that opportunity in my career, is to see those things aligned. I think at the same time, anytime that your creator or Christ has put a calling on your life to be a parent, or to be in a relationship or a marriage, I also think that those are callings on our life. And I think some of the most important work that we can do is at home, in growing decent human beings, like creating children who can just be decent humans to other humans who need decency. And I think that or to be a good reflection of relationship to your children. And I think that that's been one of the highest callings on my life, is to give, my kids and their experiences in foster care humble me every day. And sometimes it's harder than others, but I think, um, giving them an opportunity to take a glimpse into a relationship that's centered on Christ or on a believer, and then also to coach them to just be relative and understanding of the world around them is to me, probably the best calling on my life.
mm. That's so good. That's so good. And it's so beautiful that you don't just use your career path, the path that you're exchanging time, for resources, right? But you're also utilizing that in your family dynamic, in your friendships, and pretty much all of your relationships, because it's so important, and it's a divine responsibility to be able to cultivate that within every single relationship that we have, even outside of our work, the stuff that we get paid to do, right? Because it's necessary. It's necessary to be a good human being, to be a conscious human being, and to recognize that it is a responsibility for us to be able to circulate that every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that, our littlest kiddo, he brought home a punch card, and it says, Jude has had good behavior. We got an email that he had done helped a friend, who was having a hard time learning. And I was telling my husband, I'm like, man, those kind of emails, those feedback from their teachers or people in their community, they almost feel better to me than watching them get straight A's, or tying their shoes, or reading the right book, or having the right knowledge. It's like, I feel like you can feel successful as a parent if you know that your child can see someone else hurting, or they can see someone else in need. And then I'm like, okay, there's like a little mom victory, right? That you can be like, right, well, he may not be able to, read on the second grade level in kindergarten, like all those worldly pressures we have as parents, but he knows how to be a good human being. And I think those are really cool wins.
Absolutely. They're more important. They're most important wins when we're teaching each other how to be more empathetic. In fact, if you have not had a chance to go through this playlist, I really encourage you to do so, because there's so many people on this playlist that you can learn so much from. But 2 weeks ago, I just did an interview with Kevin Shaw. He's out of Seattle, originally from India, and he developed an app called Jago. And Jago, it's free. If you look it up in your marketplace, Jaago, and it is an empathy gym. It allows you to watch people's stories. It's not meant to take you more than 3 minutes. And it asks you a series of questions after you listen to the person's story. And the whole purpose of it is just to teach you to implement more compassion, empathy, grace, and understanding while giving people space to share their stories. And it's so important because we need so much more of that today. Emotional intelligence will take you so much further than any other type of intelligence will. And so I'm so glad that your son, that your children are being, they're learning that from such a young age, because it's so important. What practices do you implement to stay grounded and divinely connected to self?
I think a discipline that I've had to really build for myself, and that, if I'm honest, has wavered over time, is staying engaged in prayer and biblical reflection. I think I've been one of those like whimsical Christians that like when you pray when you need something, or you pray when you're hurting, or you pray. And I think over the years, it's required a different discipline for me to be in the Word every day, to really reflect on what God is trying to have me hear from that Word, to really think about giving praise and being mindful of the gifts and the circumstances that He's put in my life. I think one of the other grounding things professionally is, we engage in something called reflective supervision or reflective practice. And I think that's our way to check our biases, to check our hurts, to check all those things that might get in the way of us intervening with people. And an example is like I said, I've shared my own experiences as a child with domestic violence. And I would never want those things to cloud the way I interacted with a family who might be experiencing domestic violence. But we lie to ourselves if we, and so we use those opportunities to just take a pause and say, what biases might I have going into this situation? Where can I double check? What are my blind spots? Who are people who can hold me accountable to what I'm actually seeing and intervening with? And that practice has been really extended also into my personal life, using reflective practice, again, with people who you can trust to mirror you. I think keeps me really grounded. I think staying connected to my mother and my grandmother is just such an important part of me culturally, to hear just the discipline that they've developed in their lives, whether it be overcoming. My grandma at 93, there's nothing she hasn't seen, overcome, heard, learned. She's really a woman who's gone through life with less than a fourth grade education. And so getting to hear from her, I think, always keeps me grounded, and just listening to where she come from. I mean, she was born on a ranch. She lost her mother, she lost her grandmother. She was really raised in the 20s by men who were ranch workers. So you listen to all the circumstances in her life, and it's really humbling. And I think humility and grounding to me are very they're interwoven. And I think the last piece is really just, and this is probably the part that I'm the worst at, because I think when we're talking about what keeps us divinely connected, I think where I think I have the most room to grow is being a good listener. And I think being a good listener, not just to others, but a good listener to myself, and a good listener to Christ and what He's trying to say to me. And so I always have an answer for everything, because that's the way life has what it's demanded of me. And I think I'm in a different season in my life now where I'm trying to just listen. And so
That's
I
beautiful.
don't know if that's relevant, but I think that's
Oh no, that's perfect. That is perfect, because we need so much more of that. We need to be able to take the time to listen, and most importantly, to tune into what our intuition is telling us to do. Because again, everybody has the capacity to be divinely connected to source. And we don't have to seek outside of ourselves for the answer. It's already there. We just have to tune into it, listen. That way we can be divinely guided and protected through the actions that we take to be able to heal our bodies, so that we can raise our vibration and our frequency and have more of an impact on our community. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to impact the entire world. Our world, when you stretch out your arms, right? When you stretch out your arms and you go into a circle, that's your world, that's your energetic field. And that right there is relevant into how many people we can truly impact that are going to continue to help raise our vibration in our own personal world. And that is so important every single day.
Yeah.
What words of wisdom would you give to those seeking a deeper understanding of themselves?
Oh man, I think one of the things that I think that's deep in wisdom for me is getting my ass kicked. And I think if you're not in the arena, like Brene Brown says, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked, then there's a lot of things that you're not doing. You're not pursuing joy. You're not taking risks. You're not living adaptively. You're removing opportunities for joy. I mean, there's just so many things that I think. So if you're not in the arena, meaning whatever that arena is for you, whether that's losing weight or starting a new relationship or taking a change in career path, if you're not getting your ass kicked, to me, you're not really developing, you're not really stretching yourself, stretching your abilities, stretching your intuition. You're not really living beyond yourself. And I think that that's really important, because I think there's a lot of lessons that you learn in the arena. You learn who's there to watch you. You learn who's there getting their ass kicked right along the side with you. And I think that that's really important too. And I think that that's proven a lot of growth for me, is to just get my ass kicked on a regular basis. But I think the other thing is to just seek authenticity, both in yourself and in the people that you connect with. And I think that I've grown abundantly when I've been able to, instead of pursuing people who may have be in my natural path of relationship, like coworkers, family members, I think those people are in our natural path, but going out of your way to make connection with people who are different from you, who don't look like you, who don't have the same experiences as you, I think to me helps you learn something about yourself. And so I think that is really important to me too, is to really, you have to interface with people who are different than you. Otherwise, you're just getting mirrored back yourself, and you already know what looks right back at you in the mirror. So I think it's so important to find people who, and you and I have talked about that before, like all the things that you've done on your journey, like couch surf and go. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could never imagine myself couch surfing, but I get to live vicariously through your experience and think about, it expands my mind and my ability to think like, man, that's something that is really rich in learning. And even though you and I didn't have that same experience together, I can learn from you and through you. And so I think that that's been really important and really cool.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's being able to expand your perception through experiences and conversations, elevated conversations, not in the conversations that you normally you have on a day-to-day basis. Feeling comfortable with walking up to strangers, introducing yourself, and just being in flow, to just allow the divine to come in and intervene and just teach you something. Because I like to say that we're never ending students. You should never just go to college to get a degree and then that's where your learning ends. No, it needs to be continuous, because we're a never ending evolution, and there's so much to learn every day, every single day. And what piece of literature would you recommend to somebody who may be seeking just wisdom and knowledge?
I think that book that I referenced, I think Dare to Lead, or Gifts of Imperfection from Brene Brown, I think both have been meaningful to me in different ways. The Gifts of Imperfection, I think, helped me really work through authenticity with myself. And then Dare to Lead takes authenticity to a different place, because it puts it into perspective as a leader. And it also talks about risk taking and all the things that we do as insecure human beings, especially in the roles of leadership. When we have imposter syndrome, we have these stories that we tell ourselves that we're not enough, we're not equipped, and then we also are considerate of so many different people's opinions. And that book really gets down to like, and both of them are what you also talked about, learning about the difference between sympathy and empathy, and really kind of lots of different stuff that I think I've been able to incorporate into my personal life, into my professional life, and especially in friendship, because I think authenticity, when you're really centered on authenticity, then it changes who's around you. It really narrows that in, and really makes you focus on connection. And so it's made my circle a little a little smaller, but also much more rich and intimate and connected. And that's been a big blessing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. As a matter of fact, Kevin Shaw, he shared Dare to Lead. So that's definitely one. Brene Brown is such a beautiful and authentic soul, and she definitely has a beautiful story that needs to continue to be heard. So Jolene, I am so grateful for our time together. Thank you so much for all the words of wisdom and just all the experiences that you were able to share with our audience today, because these are conversations, again, I cannot stress this enough. These are conversations that need to continue to be had, because so many people are struggling right now, but there's also many people who are thriving right now. And we need to be able to share these experiences so that more people can continue to learn to empathize, to, just to be able to understand on a deeper level, not only yourself, most importantly, right? But to be able to understand the people that are in the vicinity of your energetic field. And even, I've had an opportunity to interview people from all parts of the world in other countries. And at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want to have the opportunity to connect authentically. And it's so beautiful that we now have these platforms here where, even though it's through electronics and through social media platforms, you still can feel divinely connected to the people on the other side of the screen. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you for tuning in and giving your most valuable asset, which is your time. We are just honored, and we continue to have these conversations moving forward. And we are looking forward to continue to grow this community and to allow you to be a part of this movement that is going to continue to impact lives. Thank you so much, Jolene, again, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.